OnePlus built its entire brand on a single promise: flagship specs, half the price. For years, that promise is exactly what kept their fans loyal, and what made everyone else afraid of them. The OnePlus 16 is about to break that promise. But here's the thing: breaking it might be the smartest move they've ever made. Or it could be the beginning of the end. Let's get into it. To understand why the OnePlus 16 is such a big deal, you need to understand what OnePlus actually is. When this company launched in 2014, they didn't just release a phone, they started a war. The pitch was simple: we'll give you specs that match the Samsung Galaxy and the iPhone, but we'll charge you half the price. And it worked. The OnePlus 2, the 6T, the early OnePlus 9. These phones made people feel like insiders, like they'd found the secret the big brands didn't want them to know. That identity, flagship killer, wasn't just a marketing term, it was a promise. A contract with the fans who showed up early, bought the invite-only phones, and defended OnePlus in comment sections when everyone said it was too good to be true. The OnePlus 16 is putting that contract through a shredder. Before I get into the specs, there's one thing in these leaks that OnePlus hasn't confirmed yet. It's not the camera, it's not the battery. It's the one spec that determines whether the price they're about to ask is actually defensible. I'll get to it. First, the camera. The headline leak is a 200-megapixel telephoto. And I already know what half of you are thinking. Another megapixel arms race. Another marketing number that means nothing in the real world. You're not wrong to be skeptical. A high megapixel count on a tiny sensor is just a sharper version of bad. But here's the thing. That's not what this is. The story here is the sensor size. The telephoto sensor in the OnePlus 16 is reportedly more than twice as large as the one in their current flagship. And that changes everything about how this camera actually performs. Not on paper, but in your hand, at night, at distance. Think of the sensor as a window. A bigger window lets in more light. More light means you're pulling in detail in low-light zoom shots that a smaller sensor just loses completely. More light means your photos in a dim restaurant actually look like the room you were in. More light means details at a distance look crisp instead of painted. We're talking about shots that compete with Samsung's flagship zoom system, the one that costs $1,300. For years, OnePlus users accepted a camera that was good enough in exchange for a price that was better than fair. That trade-off disappears with this phone. Here's the spec I was talking about: the sensor size, not the megapixels, the physical size of the sensor behind the lens. That one unconfirmed detail determines whether $999 is justifiable, or whether this is the most expensive OnePlus letdown ever. If the sensor delivers everything the leaks are promising, this camera system alone justifies the price jump. If it doesn't, nothing else in this phone will save it. Hold on to that, we're coming back to it. OnePlus is putting a 9,000 mAh battery in the OnePlus 16. Let me make sure you understand how absurd that number actually is. The iPhone 18 Pro Max, Apple's largest, most battery-optimized phone ever built, is expected to land around 5,100 mAh. That's Apple's ceiling. OnePlus blew past it by nearly 4,000 mAh. But a big battery plus a slow chip just gives you a heavy phone that barely moves. That's not what this is. Pair that 9,000 mAh battery with the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 6 Pro, one of the most efficient chips Qualcomm has ever put in a flagship phone. And you don't just get a big battery, you get a big battery that barely drains. People who ran the OnePlus 15 as their daily driver for 6 weeks straight still had to charge it every night. That's the baseline. Now double the battery capacity and pair it with a more efficient chip, and what you get is a phone that could realistically hit 3 full days of heavy use without touching a charger. Not 3 days of leaving it on a table, 3 days of actual use. Calls, navigation, social media, and camera. All of it. That's the kind of battery life that changes how you travel. It changes whether you pack a charger in your bag. It changes whether you ever feel that low battery panic again. Nobody wants a thin phone with a dead battery. OnePlus is finally making the right trade-off. The battery alone would make this phone worth talking about. But there are 2 more things the community can't agree on, and both of them matter. Earlier leaks had the OnePlus 16 at 240 Hz. The latest reports have them stepping back to 185 Hz. Before you call that a downgrade, 185 Hz is still the highest refresh rate shipping in any flagship phone right now. Scrolling feels instant. Animations look fluid. Gaming feels responsive. That's not the issue. The issue is resolution. OnePlus 15 users were frustrated, and they had every right to be, paying premium prices for a screen that didn't match the quality they expected. If the OnePlus 16 ships with a 185Hz 2K panel, meaning the screen looks noticeably sharper in everyday use than anything on the 15, this is a complete non-conversation. If they repeat that same resolution decision at $999, that's a problem I'll be calling out directly. The renders suggest 2K. We'll know for certain closer to launch. Then there's the AI button. OnePlus is adding a dedicated hardware button specifically for AI features. Here's what makes this interesting. There's already an action button on this device, so this isn't a replacement, it's an addition. This means OnePlus believes AI interaction on this phone is important enough to put a physical key on the chassis for it. That's either a sign they've built something genuinely different inside Oxygen OS, a layer of AI integration that actually changes how you use the phone day to day, or it's a shortcut to a chatbot dressed up as innovation. Classic move. We've seen it before. Here's what I'll say. The placement of that button in the final hardware reveal will tell you everything. A prominent, easily accessible position suggests deep integration. A tucked-away addition suggests an afterthought. Watch where they put it. Now, remember that sensor size question we've been carrying through this whole video? Here's where it lands. Here's the number nobody wants to say out loud. The most credible leak puts the OnePlus 16 at 5,000 yuan in China, which converts to roughly $725 at the Chinese price. But OnePlus has a consistent history of significant markup when their phones land in the US market. The OnePlus 15 launched at under $600 in China and arrived in the US at $899. If that same markup pattern holds, and there's no reason to think it won't, the OnePlus 16 could land at or above $999 in the United States. Let that sit for a second. OnePlus, the brand that built its entire identity on being half the price of a flagship, launching at or above $999. They are no longer selling a flagship killer, they are selling a flagship. So here's where we are. The best specs OnePlus has ever built at the highest price they've ever asked. The question is whether those two things belong in the same sentence. Here's my honest take. Because at $999, you're not just competing with phones that fell short last year. You're competing with the iPhone 18 Pro at launch. You're competing with the Galaxy S26 Ultra. You're competing with brands that have had a decade to build their ecosystems, their camera software, and their customer trust. Can OnePlus win that fight? And here's the leak that could make all of this irrelevant. Credible reports are circulating right now that the OnePlus 16 may never officially launch outside of China at all. If that turns out to be true, every conversation we just had about competing with iPhone and Samsung in the US market becomes a moot point for most of you watching this. We don't know yet, but we're watching it closely. And the moment it's confirmed either way, Tech Weekly will have it first. Subscribe now so you don't miss it when it breaks. Before I give you my honest verdict, if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. We cover every leak, every confirmation, every spec change on OnePlus and Pixel the moment it drops. Tap subscribe so the next update hits you before anyone else. Whether the OnePlus 16 is a triumph or a betrayal depends entirely on which generation of OnePlus fan you are. If you came to OnePlus for the hardware, the raw performance, the cameras, the battery, the OnePlus 16 is the best phone they've ever built. Arguably one of the most complete Android flagships of 2026. And if that's what you value above everything else, the price increase is justifiable. But if you came to OnePlus because you believed in the mission, the idea that you shouldn't have to pay flagship prices to get flagship performance, then this phone isn't for you anymore. And honestly, OnePlus knows that. The brand that used to put "never settle" on everything is now asking you to settle. Not on specs, on price. That's the real catch. My read, this is still a very good phone, possibly a great one, but it's no longer the phone that makes you feel like you outsmarted the system. At $999, you're not finding a secret, you're just buying a flagship. And the question you have to ask yourself is whether OnePlus has earned enough trust to compete with brands that have been doing this for longer. The sensor size is the deciding factor. If that telephoto sensor delivers everything the leaks are promising, if the low-light zoom shots actually hold up against a Samsung Galaxy at $1,300, then OnePlus has a genuine argument for every dollar of that price tag. If the sensor underdelivers the way some past OnePlus camera upgrades have, then this is a very expensive mistake. We'll know more when the full specs drop closer to launch, and when they do, I'll be right here. The OnePlus 16 has the most ambitious specs of any phone they've ever built. That part isn't up for debate. The debate is whether the brand that built itself on affordable excellence has earned the right to charge what excellence actually costs. Drop a comment right now. Are you in at $999? Or did OnePlus lose you the moment they stopped being the underdog? I read every single one. Subscribe to Tech Weekly. We're covering every development on this phone as it happens. See you in the next one.